I will reconvene the Environment and Natural Resources, Finance, and Policy Committee. Members, we have a hard stop of 7:15, so we're going to keep going. The first bill up is House File 1900, Representative Hollins. Renewal of the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund provided and constitutional amendment proposed. Representative Hollins, I will move that House File 1900 be re-referred to the Ways and Means Committee.
Rules Committee.
It'll actually go to Ways and Means, and then Rules will catch it there and send it. And Representative Hollins, I believe you have a DE5 amendment to get the bill in the shape you would like. I will move the DE5 amendment to get the bill in the shape the author would like. Representative Hollins, would you explain the changes in the amendment briefly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, I can explain the changes fairly quickly. The DE amendment makes a couple of small changes, including establishing a 25-year sunset on the dedication of the lottery proceeds, and amends the ballot question for language clarity. And it creates a Community Grants Advisory Council and a Community Grants Program to increase equitable use of the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund dollars by directing resources to communities that have faced barriers accessing that funds.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion prevails. The DE5 amendment is adopted. Representative Hollins, to the bill as amended.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. Thank you, committee members. I appreciate your time tonight. The Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund was created and would be reauthorized for the public purpose of protection, conservation, preservation, and enhancement of the state's air, water, land, fish, wildlife, and other natural resources. Over the last 3 decades, it's helped fund dozens of important projects to do just that across the entire state of Minnesota. It is my honor to bring this bill before you today to reauthorize the constitutional dedication of lottery proceeds to the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund into the future. As a quick background, the fund was created in 1988 with overwhelming support of the voters, and it was rededicated after a decade, again with overwhelming support of the voters. And now it is time once again to ensure that this important source of funding continues by putting the question before the voters on the 2024 ballot. Public opinion shows Minnesotans like knowing lottery proceeds are going towards environment and natural resources, with over 82% support statewide for continuing this constitutional dedication. I want to touch really quickly on the changes that were made in the author's amendment, because since we have this opportunity to look back at the last 35 years of the trust fund and LCCMR, we have been able to see where it's working and where it hasn't been working and what can be improved. So what this does is it adds clarity on what funds can and cannot be used for. It restores the dedication of proceeds from 40% to 50% of revenue. It directs unclaimed prize revenue to the trust fund, and it establishes the new program to support more projects on the ground and targets left out of communities. The community grants program is going to eligible projects that are out there that the LCCMR doesn't currently fund. And there's a couple of reasons why that is. There are a number of barriers that smaller organizations face in accessing LCCMR proceeds, and particularly because the LCCMR works on a reimbursement basis, which is difficult for most smaller organizations to handle. So we've worked really hard with the DNR commissioner and their grants programs folks to ensure accountability to the communities around the state. The DNR will make and administer the grants. An advisory council is created to work with and advise the DNR to review funded projects annually. And the bill requires annual reporting to the legislature and has a clawback provision written into it to ensure that there's accountability on everything that's being done. We're also very hopeful that this will build muscle and a future pipeline for new organizations that will be able to then seek LCCMR funds in the future. I have a number of testifiers, so I'm going to stop talking and allow them to provide testimony.
Thank you, Representative Hollins. And because we have limited time, we are going to limit testifiers to 2 minutes. Representative Jordan has the clock. So we are going to start with Dr. Dale Gentry, Conservation Manager, Audubon, Minnesota. Welcome, and state your name for the record.
Sure. My name is Dale Gentry. I'm the Director of Conservation for Audubon, Minnesota. Thank you, Chair Hansen and committee, for this opportunity to advocate for reauthorization of the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. As you're likely aware, the news about the environment is rarely positive. We are experiencing unusual patterns in our weather that bring a feast or famine of precipitation that challenges our economy and the environment. Long-eared bats are headed to the endangered species list, and we have 30% fewer birds than we had 50 years ago. All of these problems require understanding for mitigation to prevent these future problems, future declines from amplifying. This understanding comes from scientific research, and the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund supports this research, which is critical to fruitful stewardship of Minnesota's natural resources. Audubon has been funded to support the Mississippi River, one of Minnesota's most cherished places and resources. We've studied the bird community that nests in the bottomland forest and helped to develop forest management guidelines that can be used by ourselves and our partners at the DNR and the Army Corps and Fish and Wildlife Service to better care for the bottomland forests in the Mississippi River. Our current proposal that has been recommended for funding will map migratory stopover sites that are used by the community of birds that not just fly to Minnesota, but sometimes stop on their way into the north. All of these and other projects like them give us the knowledge and understanding and tools we need to make sure that we can better care for Minnesota's environment and natural resources. And I advocate for reauthorization of this, the fund through the passage of this bill.
Thank you. Rennie Gaithy, Frogtown Green. And on deck, Kateri Routh, Executive Director, Great River Greening. Welcome, and state your name for the record.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members, for having me today. My name is Rennie Gaither, and I'm here to represent Frogtown Green, a grassroots community-led initiative in St. Paul's most diverse neighborhood, Frogtown. The Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund has helped the neighborhood in at least 3 important ways, all involving expanding green space. In 2011, the trust fund helped us create a 13-acre public park, Frogtown Park and Farm, that has since grown amenities such as a nature sanctuary, a family recreation haven, and organic farm. The second way trust fund dollars help is through continuing efforts to increase tree canopy. Frogtown's tree canopy coverage hovers around 23%, which is the lowest percentage of tree canopy in St. Paul, besides the downtown area. Partnering with the St. Paul Forestry Department and others, we are able to distribute bare root trees to Frogtown residents. We've been able to plant over 600 trees in our neighborhood since 2012, and we hope to plant another 165 trees this year. The goal is to plant a total of 1,000 new trees by 2025. Trust fund money helps us do that. The third way the trust fund helps sustain our neighborhood is through funding projects that help protect, expand, and manage urban wildlife and flora. Since 2006, Frogtown Green volunteers have planted more than 8,000 square feet of native pollinator-friendly plants on the grounds of West Minnehaha Park. Our intent is to create habitat for the rusty-patched bumblebee and other pollinators. To help in this effort, we have recently partnered with the Hamlin Midway neighborhood in a project called the Bee Line, which was funded through a grant from the state's Lawns to Legumes program funded by the trust fund. Upon completion, the Bee Line will be a 2.5 quarter-mile planted corridor along a transit way already inhabited by the rusty-patched bumblebees. Okay. The trust fund has benefited from the neighborhood where I volunteer and in which I care deeply. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Kateri Routh, Executive Director, Great River Greening. And then next up, Eli Mansfield, Chair, Minnesota Chapter, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers.
Good evening. My name is Kateri Routh, and I'm Executive Director with Great River Greening, an organization that's working to restore habitats to health and resiliency. I'm here today to talk about the communities and habitats across Minnesota that have been or will be transformed through trust fund grants. Stretching from the Metro to St. Cloud, we have a trust fund grant called Pollinator Central. We are working on improving critical habitat on 40 sites with 26 partners over 9 counties, improving over 660 acres. This work will benefit pollinator habitat while also reducing maintenance for cities as we convert turf to prairie. In southern Minnesota, we've received multiple grants through the trust fund to work with farmers on sustainable ag projects. This includes adding continuous living cover crops into farmers' rotations, as well as improving savanna and woodland habitat with grazing animals, which is mutually beneficial both to the farmers' operations and the environment. In central Minnesota, we're partnering with Crow Wing Soil and Water Conservation District, restoring 90 acres of habitat to health and resiliency within the Camp Ripley Sentinel landscape. We were able to leverage trust fund dollars with this project to bring in matching funds, allowing us to work with over 120 high schoolers from Pillager High School on planting events. Great River Greening is about to submit a proposal to LCCMR around tree canopy work. We've heard from several cities and school districts, including Brookland Center, Mankato, and St. Cloud, that lack the capacity and/or the funds to address poor tree canopy. Support from the trust fund can address this issue, improving health of the city and people. The trust fund grants bring people together and more funding and more partners to the table, creating an even bigger impact on green space, wildlife, the community, and the outdoors. Thank you.
Thank you. Eli Mansfield. And then next up, Francisco Segovia, Executive Director of COPAL. Welcome. State your name for the record.
Mr. Chairman, members of committee, my name is Eli Mansfield. I am the board chairman for the Minnesota chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. BHA is a national nonprofit conservation organization. We focus on public land and water access. Our membership is representative of the political spectrum, and our board is made up of a diverse group of individuals from different backgrounds and professions. Many of those volunteers have actually been recipients of the funds we're discussing here this evening. For myself and many of the other conservationists that we've heard from already and that we'll continue to hear from, our goal is simple: leave wild places and things better than we found them. The trust fund has a great opportunity from an environmental positive impact, but my focus here tonight is really on the conservation aspects of that. At BHA, our organizational direction is guided by the North American model of wildlife. And this model of wildlife management is directly responsible for the positive and successful reintroduction and restoration of countless plant and animal species around our country. The North American model of wildlife is built on tenets that focus on equitable access for wildlife and outdoor resources. The trust fund has the potential to support projects in every community across our state. There are thousands of individuals across Minnesota, not just the few you'll hear from this evening, who want to leave our wild places and wild things better than we found them. Their ideas and their projects need funding, and they need your support. Backcountry Hunters and Anglers asks that as this bill continues to move through committee, that we maintain that focus on transparency that was already discussed through the amendments today, and that it's important to note that stewardship of these dollars is paramount to the continued success of enhancing the outdoor experience for all Minnesotans. So we'd like to thank the authors of this bill for their dedication in conservation. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you so much for your time this evening and for your civil service. Thank you.
Thank you. Francisco Segovia, Executive Director of COPAL, and then on deck, Mary Robeson, Chief Financial Officer, Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. Welcome. State your name for the record.
Excuse me. Good evening, Chair Hansen and committee members. I'm Francisco Segovia, Executive Director of Communities Organizing Power and Action for Latinos, a community, Latino-based community organization. I'm here to speak in support of House File 1900, especially about the need for the Environment and Natural Resource Trust Fund Community Grant Program. We have been involved in the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund Coalition for nearly 2 years, and have been engaged in developing the concept because there are worthy environmental projects that haven't been able to advance because of barriers to accessing the LCCMR process. Those barriers have included reimbursement requirements of the LCCMR, the time it takes for application submissions to the LCCMR to final approval of the funds is nearly a year and a half. The current model structure is designed, as designed, leaves behind many impactful organizations and potential projects. I believe allowing resources to be accessible to all, in particularly communities of color, is important to our community because research shows that people of color are far less likely to engage in natural-based outdoor recreation activities, with historic discrimination being a large underlying factor. Most importantly, humanity is experiencing drastic climate change, provoking humans to migrate. Those changes heavily impact communities of color and low-income communities. I believe resources from the LCCMR will allow us to play a decisive role in advancing initiatives to transition away from fossil fuel. We believe that this community grant program can help fill the gap and expand connections to and work in places that have been left out. Thank you, Representative Hollins, and for your leadership on this bill, and thank you, committee members, for listening.
Thank you. Mary Robeson, Chief Financial Officer, Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, and then on deck, Nels Paulson, Policy Director, Conservation Minnesota.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Mary Robison, Chief Financial Officer for the Department of Natural Resources. Thank you for having me this evening. The Department of Natural Resources supports the bill as amended. Certainly, we support the renewal of the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. Also, we've had an opportunity to work with Representative Hollins on the language related to the community grants program that the Department of Natural Resources would administer. And we believe with this current language that represents that collaboration, this grant program can be a model for both equity and grant making, while also maintaining necessary financial controls that we need in any grant program, particularly when the DNR is ultimately responsible for the use of state funds that it administers. Thank you.
Thank you. Nels Paulson, Policy Director, Conservation Minnesota. Mr. Pelican, rather than Nels, you could introduce yourself.
For the record, I'm not Nels Paulson. Nels, our policy director at Conservation Minnesota, has an incessant bloody nose and is currently in the men's room, which I'm sure he's pleased that I'm saying on live video. My name is David Pelican, and I'm the policy associate at Conservation Minnesota, so you have the B team here today. First of all, I just want to say that Conservation Minnesota is extremely proud to support House File 1900, and we thank Representative Hollins for bringing it forward. For those of you who don't know, Conservation Minnesota used to be the League of Conservation Voters of Minnesota, and we supported the last reauthorization in 1998, and now this year we're acting as a convener for the groups that are helping to support reauthorization right now in 2023. Instead of going on a long spiel, Nels wouldn't have given a long spiel either. I'm talking about him like he's dead or something.
In his honor.
Yeah, in his honor, I will keep it short. You guys have a packet in front of you today, and I just want to run through what those materials are. If it's stapled together like ours is, we have first this letter supporting the community grants program that is an addition to House File 1900. And then there are groups signed on to the back of that. The next document in there is a sign-on letter supported by our coalition and other groups that are supporting the broad reauthorization of the lottery dedication to the trust fund. So if you look on the next 2 pages after that, there are over 80 organizations signed on so far. In past reauthorization efforts, there's a tradition of these groups coming together to support this effort, and we're pleased to have strong support once again. If you look on the next page, we have a general overview of the reauthorization proposal, which is that continuing the tradition page, which is followed by a page that includes the working coalition that has come together to formulate this legislation alongside Representative Hollins and the DNR. And then the last piece that we have here is a 2-pager on the community grants program, which provides a quick overview on what that addition is and why it's so important for expanding access to small communities and organizations that need access to this money as well.
Thank
And
you.
then, yeah, there you go. And then I can stand for questions as well. Nell should be able to come in as well, but I've got some resources on that. I can always defer.
Thank you. We did have one person who signed up, and then we will take other testimony if people would like. Rick Heller. Welcome, and state your name for the record.
My name is Rick Heller. Unofficially represent the twice exceptional and print disabled. If anybody's interested in, it's in House File 1269 on page 4 for the twice exceptional and page 128 on line 9 for the new word that's being swapped out with handicap, turning it again into print disability. I'm a white male with a beard and a camouflage hat. Those don't have access to a picture based on their sensory. On this 1900 bill, there's some things that are problematic. Been pursuing it probably since 2017 on the mandated reports that come back to the legislature. Third parties, hopefully, are all listening in on this, that they manually check their documents before they submit them and provide assurances that they manually check them and they're accessible with the appropriate softwares. That's my understanding. Most of them are sent back in a portable document format, which can read out loud. Unless we make some changes with that, other than the working group memo, that working group report that came, 18-week report that came out. Ms. Weber did speak at the Lassard regarding those third-party documents, or say mandated documents as well. And then she also spoke in Senate government operations. One other example is today is a handout that you currently have, which I was up in the library checking the accessibility of it. In fact, it's one of the handouts the last speaker had. It is not accessible with a reader. Just another example of people manually checking their own documents to see if they're accessible for the public at large. And then the last thing would be a captioning. Captioning is not allowed in this room for how it's wired. I talked to Barry, the communication director in the House, and that again provides a barrier for the twice exceptional and print disabled individuals. I hope there's an action plan other than a bunch of recommendations from the working group that comes out of this, because the legislature needs to give guidance on how to prioritize what they want to do. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify for or against the bill? There is someone in the back, if they would testify for. You have to come forward and introduce yourself.
Chair Hansen, members of the committee. Brian Miller with Conservation Corps, Minnesota. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm here on behalf of Conservation Corps in support of House File 1900. I've been with Conservation Corps for over 20 years, lifelong resident of Minnesota, active in outdoors for recreation, hunting, and camping. And in my years with Conservation Corps, I've witnessed firsthand the impacts of the Environmental Natural Resources Trust Fund and its impact on our ability to better the lives of thousands of Minnesota youth and young adults by engaging in a wide variety of partnerships with state agencies, educational institutions, and nonprofits to conserve the state's resources and develop the next generation of conservationists. In addition to significant positive impacts these funds have had on restoring, enhancing, and protecting natural resources, The projects they support have also changed the lives of so many of our participants through meaningful service opportunities that give them important skills to succeed in their careers. We've been able to engage in projects to restore resources while increasing the diversity and the experience level of folks entering the conservation field, including partnerships working with veterans and with underrepresented communities who may not otherwise have opportunities to explore the outdoors and these career fields. Both Conservation Corps and many of the partners we collaborate with are able to leverage additional federal and private dollars because of the support from the Environmental and Natural Resources Trust Fund to do more with less. I've also seen how the funding is often the first step towards building innovative approaches to conservation that are more efficient and more effective and allow us and our partners to develop new best management practices and build sustainable programs and projects that last well beyond the funding from the trust fund and provide lasting benefits to the state. I'm proud to live and work in a state that strongly supports our heritage and continues to invest in what makes us stand out from our peers when it comes to quality of life and outdoor resources. And I'm thankful for this opportunity to speak to you today to voice support for giving the voters this choice to recommit our state to those values. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to testify either for or against the bill? Anyone else? So we'll open up for questions among members. Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Hollins, I don't think I've seen someone work harder on a bill than I've seen you work on this bill. So thank you for what you've done for the people of this state. I'm very excited about this idea about community organizations. And so I am wondering about what sorts of community organizations would be eligible to apply for these sorts of grants, and then what sorts of projects and organizations would this fund. And I know there's a lot of material I have not managed to make it through yet, so I'm hoping you could just give us a little bit of an overview.
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Chair Hansen, and thank you, Representative Jordan, or Vice Chair Jordan, for the question. So we've really designed this bill with the idea that a number of organizations from both within the metro, but also in rural Minnesota, who don't currently have access. So we're looking at smaller organizations, nonprofits in particular, but also, making sure that tribal organizations and tribal governments have access to it as well, all within the purview of the needs of those communities, and also decided upon with some of the, with input from the committee that will be created with help from the DNR. So we know that when we've talked to people, there are a number of different organizations that simply don't have the staffing available to apply to some of these larger grants like the LCCMR to get those funds. And so we're really looking at trying to streamline this process, but also make sure that the proper that there's proper oversight in what we're doing, and making sure that whoever the fiscal agents are that they're working with, that they are absolutely responsible for what's happening, that there's good reporting coming back to us. Because we want to make sure that we're really good stewards of this money. We know that it's important, and we know that it can really help turn some of these smaller organizations into larger, more capable organizations if it's done correctly.
Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. Yeah, like Mr. Pelican, I'm part of the B team, so a lot of solidarity there. But, and so what sorts of projects would be eligible for this funding then, that these organizations could complete?
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair. And, at this point, we're looking at certainly research projects if folks want to do that, because that has been traditionally what LCCMR funding has been used for. But I think also branching out a little bit into other projects that fall within the LCCMR purpose of what the funds are to be used for. So the protection of air, land, water, in any sort of form that you can think of. So, and they will be just, it's going to be competitive. We anticipate that it's going to be competitive. So it's not something where we're just going to take everything that everybody suggests. I'm not going to be part of it, thank God. Somebody else has really hard decisions to make. But I think that we understand that these funds are necessary, and that the projects that we are looking to fund might be a little bit broader than what has traditionally been funded through the LCCMR, just because there are different needs depending on the size of the organization and also the makeup of the organization.
Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. Thank you, Representative Hollins. I think this is, I used to sit on the Legacy Committee, and every day I had someone in my office telling me about how it was too hard for them, and the system was not set up for them to receive funding from the legislature to that would be within the constitutional uses. And so I think it's something really innovative you've done here. And I want to thank you for all the work you've done to make sure that everyone has access to this money, since it is everyone's contribution. And the projects that come from those contributions should reflect the people of Minnesota. And thank you for the work that you're doing to ensure that that happens.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Hollins. So in thinking about this, and as we're creating this community grant program, could you give the committee just an idea of how much money would go to this fund in each year?
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative Schultz. Absolutely. So we're increasing the amount that the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund actually receives, right, from that 40% to 50%. So we anticipate using that extra amount of funds to be what funds the community grant program in particular. And so right now that's about $20 million.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Hollins. And then to just go into the grant side of it for a moment, is there anything in this bill that would create a cap on grants?
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative Schultz. I'm trying to think through, and I don't have the language right in front of me, but I don't believe so, no.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Hollins. I would just encourage, as this bill moves forward, that may be something that you want to consider as it moves forward.
Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Hollins, I've served on both the LCCMR and the Clean Water Council over the years, and I'm reading in line 2.1 through 2.2. That's the constitutional question. Shall the Minnesota Constitution be amended to protect drinking water sources and the water quality of lakes, rivers, and streams? And the reason I'm bringing that up is the Clean Water Council works in that subject area very heavily, and obviously legacy money there being appropriated and spent very specifically for drinking water sources, water quality, lakes, rivers, and streams. It's kind of a duplication. What are we getting at here? What's the reason for adding that to the question for the reauthorization?
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. Thank you, Representative Heinzman. I'm going to phone a friend.
Welcome, and state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. Stephanie Pincala with the Nature Conservancy. We are part of the larger coalition that's been supporting Representative Hollins' effort on this bill. To the question about potential duplication in the language, I think it's important to recognize that up until this point, a lot of the projects that have been funded by Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund dollars have had the impact of providing clean water, drinking water, et cetera, all the things that you listed that are in the bill. So this is a reflection of the work that has been accomplished to date with Environment and Natural Resources Trust Funds that people like, and that would continue with the reauthorization of the effort.
Representative Heinzman.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Thank you for that answer. But as you just said, it's already happening at the LCCMR. Am I understanding correctly? So, and it's happening at the Clean Water Council as they're making recommendations. The duplication of the language is interesting, but if it's already allowed, I'm just trying to get at the question as to whether, is it necessary? Is it produce an outcome that we don't already have?
So again, I believe you're referring to the ballot question
ballot.
language, correct?
Correct.
Thank you for letting me, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the question is what we are putting out to voters. So we want to enhance their understanding of what they are voting for. And again, with the expectation that this, that money from the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund has already been spent for these purposes. It's kind of an advertisement for what people are signing up for when they vote yes or no on this question on their ballot.
Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you. I think I understand what you're getting at. It doesn't necessarily change anything. It's, like you said, more of an advertisement. That's a good way to characterize it. I did have a few other questions, Mr. Chair.
Just on that point, I had a question for the author.
I can wait.
Representative Hollins, as the author, is it your intent, really the purpose on line 1.10, that the purpose of the Constitution language doesn't change? Is that correct? Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. Yes, that is correct. It's the same purpose that's been in place since 1988.
Thank you. Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Chair. I have another line of questioning that I just kind of want to follow, if that's okay, Representative Hollins. So I was looking more at the community grant program and wanted to better understand what kind of projects you expect to be funded there. Now, that is something that I'll just tell you, and I think that Director Nash could confirm, we have worked at that in the past on the LCCMR in targeting grants. I think they were $50,000 or less to some smaller organizations and tried to build that into the LCCMR process. It's quite a while ago, but it's something that we did work on. And I guess I'm just kind of wondering, is there anything that we learned during that time years ago when we tried to target grants to small organizations, which I think is what I heard you say you're working towards doing with this particular program? I guess to get it right to it, then what kind of projects would be funded there that haven't been funded in the past?
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative Heinzman. I am not entirely sure that I understand your question. Let me try to repeat it and see if I got it right. You're asking, are you asking specifically what projects will be funded that have not been funded historically by the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund and the LCCMR?
Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Chair. We're creating this new community grant program in your language, in the bill.
Mm-hmm.
Is it doing something different than has been done in the past? What's it trying to accomplish? If we missed something in past LCCMR appropriations, and is this the answer? I'm trying to figure out what motivated the creation of this grant program.
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative Heinzman. I'm not going to say that I for sure know what the answer is, but what we did was work with a whole coalition of smaller organizations that work in the space of environment and conservation who said that they feel like they are not able to access the funds from the LCCMR. And we kind of went through all the different reasons why they didn't have access to those funds and how they thought they might be able to achieve that access and how they would use those funds. And so what we tried to do was build a program around what the shortcomings were that we were hearing about the LCCMR and how we might better address that for those smaller organizations. The organizations in question, for the most part, don't have a full-time grant writing staff. They don't have funds that they could put up front for the cost of projects and then wait to be reimbursed 15 months later. Things like that you kind of heard from like Copal and some of the other organizations where they felt that the system that we have of LCCMR works really, really well for certain groups, but it doesn't work at all for other groups. And we wanted to make sure that we were allowing those other groups to access this because we feel that some of them were falling through the cracks. Did that answer your question?
I got a few on the list, Representative Heinzman. Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Chair. I think I understand what you're trying to accomplish with this community grant program, Representative Hollins. So I'm not sure that I'm there yet. I feel like there's that high level of expectation from the public that there's a very exhaustive process. And I think that you said it very well in that process works really good, and then you narrowed it to a number of groups. And that's why I was trying to get at if there was something missing, because you don't want to lose that high level of quality in terms of how stringent that process is to make sure. I'm fine, I think, for now, Mr. Chair. I think that there might be some more questions as we get towards the end, but I appreciate the time.
Representative Finke, and then Representative Purcell, and then Representative Fisher. Representative Finke.
Thank you, Chair Hansen, and thank you, Representative Hollins, for this essential and very good bill. I just wanted to say that, I couldn't help but overhear the last conversation. Exhaustive process is often a weapon against those who do not have the social and political capital to navigate very complicated systems that keep Copal and other organizations that keep Frogtown green, small groups who don't need huge sums of money but are lost in the exhaustive process that we have built. And I think it's not a lot of money, goes a really long ways when you're working in communities that have had very little access in the past. So this is the model, and I'm really glad that you fought so hard to keep it.
Representative Hollins.
Thank you.
Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. Thank you, Representative Hollins, for bringing this. I think how I would have answered Representative Heinzman's question, which I'm not sure if this is true, but I guess how I interpret this is it is the same types of projects and the same types of outcomes. It's just the different process. And getting to what Representative Finke just talked to, the nonprofit that I was at for 8 years never even tried. I mean, the barriers to entry for a nonprofit that was even around for 3 decades because we were small, the barriers to entry were too much. So when I read this, I just see that we're maybe just talking about a different scale. So perhaps smaller pots of money, less exhaustive process, but yet the same sort of types and spirit of the projects. That's my interpretation, and maybe that's clarifying, and maybe I just confused the whole thing.
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Representative Purcell. I would say yes, that is true. And I mean, getting back to Representative Heinzman's point, working with the DNR in particular, they were very concerned about making sure that it was a rigorous process, that it was something that had a lot of review involved in it, that there was a lot of oversight involved. And that's part of the reason why we brought them into this conversation, because although these are smaller grants, smaller amounts of money, smaller organizations, we want to make sure that they are going through we have the same expectations for them, right? We expect the money to be spent well. We expect to see outcomes from this, and we want to see that reporting on it. And if they're not going to spend that money, we want that money to go back into the fund where it belongs. So yes, it's a yes. And also we're working hard to make sure that, we're doing right by the people's funds.
Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Hollins, thank you so much for the work you've done on this, and I appreciate the opportunities to talk to you over the last few weeks on this and address my concerns that were some of the concerns that we've heard today. And one of the things I want to give comfort to people on is that I'm strongly supportive of this bill. I'm asking to be added as a co-author. The thing that really impressed me is that when we were talking how you likened this small grant project very similar to what's going to be used, that is currently used on the Minnesota State Art Board, where they give out these small projects like that, and they keep accountability there where for these small nonprofits out there that can't afford to put the money out, they do get the money right up front. And what's great is there's a great reporting mechanism where they report everything back, they've got to submit the receipts, and on top of it, I know of instances where when they've not spent all the money, they send the money back. So this is following that kind of program out there. And I think that's what gives me a lot of security and a lot of faith is that we're following established processes used with other monies distributed by our state here with the accountability factions that make sure we're getting the great work done and making sure everybody is accountable in the process. So thank you for the work you've done on this, and I'm looking forward to this going forward.
Representative Hollins.
Thank you.
Any other? Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as I had mentioned earlier, and Representative Hansen, you two, both of us have served at the LCCMR. And I could have been more clear, and I'll try to. I think what the issue was, and I was driving at somewhat, Representative Hollins, is that the small grant effort that we pushed a number of years ago, it wasn't unsuccessful or I don't know that there were any problems specifically, except that In many cases, those small projects failed to get commission support at a level that moved the projects forward. Hopefully that makes sense. So if this new group that's going to be maybe vetting projects or something, which I'm not clear on, which is part of why I was asking questions, is going to change that, okay. But, because we all have a vested interest in this. We all care about the ENRTF, the Environment Natural Resource Trust Fund, and the LCCMR, and how these things work to the benefit of very important projects around the state. And the small projects have been an ongoing conversation for a long time. But the reason a lot of those small projects did not make it is because they did not, for whatever reason, have support amongst the members of the LCCMR. And many times they just fell short of getting that support. So if this doesn't fix that, then it's not going to make any difference in my estimation. Thank you for the chance to clarify, Mr. Chair.
Representative Hollins.
I don't, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative Heinzman. I hope it does fix it. I mean, we won't know until we try. The nice thing about this is that this aspect of it is not constitutional. This aspect of it is statutory. And so we can absolutely come back and change it. We can tweak it. We can make corrections where necessary. And part of the reason we didn't really flesh out how exactly this is going to look is because we wanted that committee to work with the DNR commissioner and with that grants program group to make sure that we are, you know, really getting at what they want to get at, but making sure that we're doing it in a really safe and responsible way. So I can't tell you exactly what it's going to look like. And believe me, I have a little bit of a control issue, and it makes me anxious to allow that to happen. But I'm trusting the process, also knowing that it's in statute and we make the statutes. So, yeah.
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think to the previous discussion, you know, having the advisory council and the membership that you have described in here will really allow for the members on the advisory council to be reflective of the entire state. And so I think the intentionality of doing that will ensure that, you know, whatever projects come before the for this funding, that they can actually meet those thresholds that, you know, the current process, because of whatever reason is behind that, you know, they can't score highly for funding. And so having the intentionality of having people that really is reflective of the communities across the state, I think that that's good, and really appreciate seeing that part here. Thank you.
Representative Hollins.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions? I have a couple questions, just, and not on the community grants.
Okay.
So since it is a constitutional amendment, I'd like to get your intent as the author. I'm assuming it is not your intent that any of the funds here are used as base funding for agencies, that these are special and should be used for special purposes rather than ongoing appropriations for agencies.
That is
Representative
correct.
Hollins.
That is correct.
And Representative Hollins, in the past, the trust fund has funded research. There's been a debate about whether there should be research or whether there should be, quote, projects in the ground. As the author, do you believe that research is an important component of the purpose of the fund?
Thank you, Chair Hansen. Yes, I do believe research is an important component of the fund.
And Representative Hollins, for you know, the most important question when it talks about wildlife, do you consider that pollinators are part of the wildlife? Representative Hollins.
Absolutely. Maybe the most important aspect of wildlife.
I think we've lost Representative Heinzman, so maybe it is time to vote. Representative Brand.
It is. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Hollins, I don't want to cross-examine you here, but I just want to say, just more wholly talking about since 1988, this whole process, this whole project, this whole opportunity that we have in our state, the outcomes. We have to, I think at some point, underline just how many outcomes we've had. Because of this particular legislation, because of this particular support from the folks that vote here in Minnesota, this fund has actually helped make our state a better place to live, a better place to have a business, a better place to attract people to come to our state and promote our economy, tourism, or otherwise just to retire. And so I just wanted to point out real quickly, because maybe that part wasn't talked about too much tonight, but between now and when this is going to be on the ballot, I hope every group that's listed here, there's a lot of great Minnesota groups, that's the job, to make sure that the voter understands what the outcomes have been since 1988. Thank you.
Representative Hollins, to close.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Brand, for that. I'll be very quick in my closing. I think most of you know that I was born and raised in Hawaii, and people often ask, like, how did I end up in Minnesota? But one of the things I love about Minnesota, and I think we have in common with Hawaii, is we love our outdoor spaces. We love our natural resources. We love our air and our water and the ground that we walk on. We like hiking and biking and all of this great stuff that we have. And that's one of the reasons I was really excited to be able to carry this bill, because to me, that's part of what makes Minnesota a place that I want to live, is the protection of conservation of this land and this water and this air. And I think that this bill allows us to come together across political lines, across partisan lines, and really support our natural resources and support the organizations across the state that use those resources to make Minnesota a place that we want to live. So I would encourage a yes vote. Thank you.
Thank you. I renew my motion that House File 1900 as amended be re-referred to the Ways and Means and Committee. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no.
No.
The motion prevails. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is House File 2778 from Representative Hansen as relates to the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources. Representative Hansen, as you get settled in, would you like to move your bill?
I will move that House File 2778 be re-referred to the Ways and Means Committee.
And Representative Hansen, I see you have the A3 Authors Amendment. Would you like to move this amendment and explain it for the committee?
For committee members, if you remember back about an hour and a half ago, this is similar. So I would move the A3 Authors Amendment.
Representative Hansen moves the A3 amendment to get the bill in the form the author would like. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no, and the motion prevails, and the A3 amendment is adopted. Representative Hansen, to your bill as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. This is the reform of the Legislative and Citizens Commission on Minnesota Resources. In the earlier part of this meeting, we went over this as an amendment. Ms. Taylor, do you want to just state what was different in this particular bill?
Ms. Taylor.
Madam Chair and members, I might not recall everything, but we had some timing issues, so I didn't get everything that's incorporated in the earlier amendment that we saw. But I believe that the differences would be on line 2.2 and 2.3. The appointment would be by the Senate Majority Leader in the other amendment. This one has not been updated to reflect that. There is also no section that conform to the different, like the staggered terms. I was unable to have time to fix that, so that was included in the other amendment, and it's not included in here. I think there was a effective date on the Citizen Selection Committee that is different than the one in here. And I think that's it, but don't quote me.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Representative Hansen.
And again, I want to thank Ms. Taylor for working on this on long hours. So, the reason on the change with the Senate Majority Leader versus the Committee on Rules, that was language that was requested for the Legislative Audit Commission to just make it easier, because then the majority leaders, which may change, can act rather than waiting for the full Rules Committee to be meeting. So that was our intent. Just was using the same model as is being proposed, a change for the Legislative Audit Commission.
And Chair Hansen, I know that Becca Nash from the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources is in the audience to answer questions should committee members have them. But is there anyone else in the audience who would like to testify for or against this bill? With that, we will go to questions from members.
Madam Chair, I think we had a very good, thorough discussion earlier this afternoon. It's essentially the same bill running separately. I would like to conform it when it goes to the next committee, so it's the same as what we had as the amendment to give us that opportunity. So,
Should I take those as your closing comments?
yes.
And with that, Representative Hansen renews his motion that House File 2778 as amended be re-referred to the Ways and Means Committee. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
The motion prevails. Representative Hansen, do you have any closing comments for this committee?
Well, members, thank you for the journey this session. We may be meeting again. You never know during the session, but we've done a lot of work, and I appreciate all of your involvement and expect that we'll continue to work together as the next few weeks unfold. So thank you for all your work.
And thank you, Chair Hansen, for your work on this committee as well. Members, with that, we are adjourned.